The showroom smelled of polished leather and exclusivity, its marble floors gleaming under golden chandeliers. Behind the glass walls stood jets so luxurious that even billionaires hesitated before purchasing. The atmosphere was silent, not with peace, but with an unspoken rule. This place was only for those who belonged. Then the doors slid open. A man walked in, his steps slow, unrushed. A worn-out cap covered his hair, his simple grey t-shirt and faded jeans standing in stark contrast to the high-end suits around him. His sneakers, slightly scuffed, tapped against the floor that had never seen anything less than designer shoes. Keanu Reeves looked around, his expression calm, eyes quietly admiring the aircraft like a man who had stepped into a museum of fine art. Across the room, a tall blonde salesman froze mid-conversation. His perfectly ironed suit, polished cufflinks, and confident stance all screamed authority in this space. But now his brows furrowed. His gaze scanned Keanu from head to toe, confusion flickering in his eyes. A nobody. That's what he saw. His lips curled into an amused smirk. He leaned slightly toward the security guard near the entrance. A silent exchange. "Do I need to handle this?" The guard hesitated, then shook his head. Not yet. Taking a slow breath, the salesman adjusted his tie and strode toward Keanu, his polished shoes clicking against the floor. His expression was polite, but his tone carried a weight of subtle condescension. "Sir, may I help you?" He dragged out the words, emphasizing help, as if it were a generous offer. Keanu didn't flinch. His lips curved into a faint smile, a quiet amusement flickering in his eyes. "I'd like to see some models." A beat of silence. The salesman blinked, then let out a short, sharp laugh, shaking his head. "Models," he repeated, tilting his head as if he had misheard. His arms crossed, gaze narrowing. It was absurd. This man, this nobody, wanted to see jets that cost more than entire neighborhoods. His eyes flickered toward the entrance, almost expecting someone to jump in and say this was a joke, but Keanu just stood there, waiting, calm as ever. The salesman's smirk faded. His patience, already thin, stretched to its limit. "Are you sure you're in the right place, sir?" There it was, the final warning, a chance to walk away without embarrassment. Keanu's smile didn't waver. He took a slow breath and nodded. "Yes. I'm exactly where I need to be." The air around them shifted. The salesman clenched his jaw, but something inside him hesitated. His instincts told him to dismiss this man, to call security. But there was something off about him, something he couldn't quite place. With an exaggerated sigh, the salesman turned on his heel. "Fine, if that's what you want." His tone was clipped, his irritation barely hidden. He strode toward the VIP section, expecting, hoping, that the stranger would finally realize his mistake and leave. But Keanu? He followed, without hesitation. And just like that, the entire showroom, the employees, the silent observers, everyone, watched in quiet curiosity, unable to look away. Something was about to happen. The tension followed them like a shadow. The blonde salesman walked briskly, his shoes tapping sharply against the pristine marble floor, but Keanu's pace remained the same, steady, unbothered. The deeper they moved into the showroom, the more exclusive the jets became. These weren't just aircraft, they were flying palaces, crafted for oil tycoons, royalty, and billionaires who never checked price tags. The salesman suddenly stopped, turning sharply on his heel. With a tight-lipped smile, he gestured toward the nearest aircraft, a sleek black jet with a gold-lined interior, barely visible through its tinted windows. "Here we have the Falcon LX-900, he announced in a monotone voice. A transatlantic masterpiece, Italian leather seating, customized luxury suites, and state-of-the-art avionics. A true symbol of power and—" He paused, tilting his head slightly as his smirk returned. "Exclusivity." His eyes flicked to Keanu, waiting, no, expecting for hesitation, maybe even discomfort. But Keanu simply tilted his head, observing the jet with quiet interest. "Looks nice," he said, stuffing his hands into his pockets. "But this isn't the most exclusive one, is it?" The salesman blinked. For the first time, his smugness cracked. "Excuse me?" His voice was sharper now, as if Keanu had just spoken in a foreign language. Keanu's gaze remained calm, unwavering. "I'd like to see your best jet, the most expensive one you have." A strained silence stretched between them. The salesman exhaled sharply through his nose, the corners of his mouth twitching, as if fighting back a laugh. "Mr. Reeves," he dragged out the name, mocking, "I don't think you quite understand. These aren't ordinary planes. They're worth hundreds of millions of dollars." He took a slow step forward, his voice lowering as if explaining something to a child. "We don't cater to tourists." Keanu remained perfectly still. His face showed no irritation, no offense. Just that same, relaxed, almost amused expression that was beginning to unsettle the salesman. "I'd still like to see it." The salesman clenched his jaw. For the first time since this ridiculous exchange had begun, doubt crept into his mind. What if this guy wasn't some lost wanderer? What if this nobody was actually somebody? The thought bothered him. His gaze flicked toward the entrance, but his colleagues only shrugged, equally confused. The salesman exhaled, rubbing his temple before finally giving in. With an exaggerated sigh, he turned abruptly and walked toward the private section of the showroom. "Fine. But don't say I didn't warn you." His voice dripped with sarcasm, but as Keanu followed him without hesitation, the salesman felt something he wasn't used to, a strange, gnawing sense of unease, and he didn't know why. The private section of the showroom was different, quieter, more secluded. This was where real deals happened, where billionaires discussed transactions that could buy entire islands. The air smelled richer, the lighting softer, casting a golden glow over the jets that sat like untouchable masterpieces. The salesman's irritation was now carefully masked under forced politeness. He stopped in front of a towering jet, sleek, silver, with an entrance lined with velvet carpeting. "This," he said, his voice sharp with emphasis, "is the Gulfstream G7500. $70 million. Custom interiors, bulletproof exterior. This is what real clients look for." He turned, expecting the moment he had been waiting for, the moment when this nobody would finally back down, maybe even stammer out an excuse before leaving. But Keanu simply observed the jet, then looked back at the salesman. "Still not the most exclusive one, is it?" The salesman froze. A dry laugh escaped him, but it lacked its earlier confidence. "You're kidding, right?" His smile tightened. "Do you even know what you're asking for?" Keanu shrugged. "I know exactly what I'm asking for." And that was the moment, the shift. For the first time, the salesman wasn't just annoyed. He was angry. This wasn't curiosity anymore, this was disrespect. His fingers curled into a fist before he forced them to relax. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a condescending whisper. "Listen, sir, this isn't a mall. This isn't a museum where you can come and take a tour. This is for people who matter, people with power. And you—" He gave Keanu a slow, scornful glance from head to toe. "Are not one of them." Silence. The tension in the air was thick now, almost suffocating. Employees in the distance had stopped pretending not to watch. But Keanu? He didn't blink. He didn't flinch. He didn't react at all. Instead, he did something far worse. He smiled, a slow, calm, knowing smile. And that was the first moment, the first real moment, that fear crept into the salesman's eyes. Because suddenly, he wasn't so sure anymore. The salesman's smirk wavered, just for a second. But Keanu caught it. That flicker of uncertainty, that split-second hesitation. It was happening. The salesman cleared his throat, forcing himself to regain control. He wasn't going to let some nobody throw him off, not in his own showroom. "All right, enough of this," he snapped, stepping even closer. "I don't know what kind of joke you think this is, but I have real clients to attend to. So unless you're about to pull a checkbook out of those—" He gestured at Keanu's faded jeans with disgust. "Then you can leave." Keanu just looked at him. Steady, calm, unshaken. Can I see the most exclusive jet now? The salesman's stomach twisted. Number, that wasn't how this was supposed to go. Keanu was supposed to leave. He was supposed to feel embarrassed. Instead, he was standing there, owning the moment, as if the insult had never touched him. The salesman's jaw clenched, but before he could respond, a new sound cut through the thick silence. Footsteps, firm, purposeful, authoritative. The salesman turned instinctively, expecting security to finally escort this man out. But it wasn't security. It was the store manager. And the moment the salesman saw his expression, his stomach dropped. The manager wasn't walking. He was marching, his face unreadable, his eyes locked onto the situation unfolding before him. The salesman stiffened. "Sir," he started, his voice suddenly a little less steady. This man..." The manager didn't even glance at him. He walked straight to Keanu. And then he smiled. "Mr. Reeves." His voice was calm, but beneath it was something unmistakable. Respect. The salesman felt his chest tighten. Number. The room felt like it had stopped breathing. The employees, the security, the few clients in the background. Everyone. "It's an absolute pleasure to have you here," the manager continued. And just like that, everything shattered. The salesman's world tilted on its axis. His throat tightened, his palms dampened, and his mind scrambled for an explanation. Any explanation, because this couldn't be real. This man, this nobody, was Keanu Reeves. The salesman felt the blood drain from his face. And Keanu, he was still smiling, because he had known all along. The salesman's body locked up, his mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. His mind was spinning, but his feet felt glued to the showroom floor. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. But the growing whispers in the showroom, the wide-eyed employees, and the manager's composed smile all confirmed the terrifying truth. The man he had just insulted, mocked, and nearly thrown out wasn't just some random guy. It was Keanu Reeves, a megastar, a Hollywood legend, a man worth hundreds of millions, possibly more than every customer who had ever walked through these doors. The manager turned slightly, his gaze shifting toward the salesman, and in that instant, the salesman felt his stomach sink. "I trust you've been treated with the respect you deserve, Mr. Reeves," the manager asked smoothly. Keanu let out a quiet chuckle, shaking his head as if the situation barely fazed him. "Let's just say, it's been an interesting experience." The manager's polite expression didn't change, but the temperature in the room dropped. Employees had fully stopped what they were doing, their eyes darting between Keanu and the salesman, like they were witnessing a slow-motion car crash. The salesman finally found his voice, though it came out weaker than he intended. I didn't know, sir. If I had..." Keanu turned his gaze toward him, and for the first time, the silence felt heavier than the words. "If you had known," Keanu repeated softly, tilting his head, "you would have treated me differently." The salesman's throat tightened, because there was no right answer to that question. The manager didn't need to say anything. His silence was more damning than any words could be. "Can I have a word with you?" The manager finally spoke, his voice calm but firm. And just like that, the salesman knew he was finished. The showroom was silent, the kind of silence that felt heavier than noise. The salesman stood frozen, his chest rising and falling in uneven breaths. He wanted to disappear, to wake up and realize this was just a nightmare. But it wasn't. It was real. Keanu Reeves had just exposed him without raising his voice, without a single insult, without even trying. The manager's sharp gaze remained fixed on the salesman, but his voice was controlled. "Follow me, now." The salesman swallowed hard and nodded stiffly, his feet unwillingly moving as he followed his boss toward the back offices. But before they disappeared, Keanu spoke again. "You know," his voice was light, almost casual, "the richest people are often the ones who feel the least need to prove it." The words hit like a gut punch. The salesman stopped in his tracks. He knew exactly what Keanu meant, and so did everyone else in the room. The lesson wasn't just for him, it was for all of them. Keanu turned back to the manager. "Shall we take a look at that exclusive jet now?" The manager nodded immediately, his entire demeanor shifting back to professional. "Of course, Mr. Reeves, right this way." As Keanu walked forward, completely unbothered, the salesman lowered his head. For the first time, he felt the weight of what he had done. But the damage was done. The world had already seen it. Near the showroom entrance, a woman who had been standing quietly in the background checked her phone, her hands steady as she uploaded the video she had secretly recorded. And within minutes, the world was watching.